In the dressing room with Chrissy B and other G's. In the dressing room with Project.KB every week. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm feeling well slept. I took a little midday nap.
There you go.
Yeah, so thanks for joining.
Of course, of course.
Are you in your home?
I am.
Cool. So I was just telling people that we're going to talk a little bit about you as an artist, Miss Janae Jones, and about the creative process, kind of what exactly this project is and what the event is going to be like on Friday for people who want to join, who are interested in joining. And also, yeah, just like the creative process during COVID, your work-life balance, and yeah, I'll just say a little bit, a little formal introduction. In the Dressing Room is a weekly interview series with different artists, creatives, artistic directors, and kind of creative business experts, where we kind of introduce each other's audiences, your audience and my audience, so we can figure out what kind of is going on around the world. And in today's episode, specifically what's going on in New York and Brooklyn. Yeah, and we're kind of just bringing down the creative process barrier, the collaboration process barrier, and just keeping it very open. If people want to ask questions about anything, that is totally up for grabs. And yeah, it happens weekly. And so I'm really excited to have Janae here. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the peeps who are here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janae Jones. I am an artist. I tell stories musically. And I just finished with a short musical film about a project called Baby Moon. And this project really just highlights how, in a time of depression, getting pregnant actually acted as a catalyst to get me to my healing and evolve. And so I just feel like there's so many stories like this that we don't necessarily see told from a Black woman's perspective. And so my goal is just to bring a different shade to Blackness, just highlighting things that we don't necessarily have examples of or have any sort of representation. So that's me. I'm Janae.
Yeah, and I posted very last minute, but that beautiful like 1 minute snippet, is that from your film? Is that a little snippet from the film?
Yeah, trailer to it.
The trailer. So if you haven't seen it yet, I posted it earlier today. Janae also posted on your Instagram, which is Soul of Jean. If you haven't followed yet, you should.
It's Soul of Janae.
Say it again?
Soul of Janae.
Soul of Janae, right. Sorry, I'm like thinking how I read it to myself. And
no, it makes sense because that's really how it's spelled. But basically, and I talk about this in the show, I use my maiden last name, the last 4 letters, to create my artist name. So it was a way to sort of like keep my past, but, you know, embrace my present that's leading me into my future. Because I'm Janae Jones and that's my actual married last name. So, you know, bridging the two. But yes, it is not necessarily spelled Janae. It definitely favors Jean. And in my maiden last name, it's Philogene. So yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, let's get started and talk a little bit about your journey. So we met through Boston Conservatory, our alma mater, and kind of has somehow stayed in touch loosely, and then more recently in the past few years, more frequently. So that's awesome. But do you just want to talk a little bit about where the project stemmed from? Of course, you mentioned your pregnancy already, but just talk a little bit of your backstory and how you found yourself creating this album.
This story is really my story. I was pregnant. And for me, getting pregnant during COVID was a lot because I was just so used to being busy, especially as like an artist who is not fully making their living in their art. Like it just becomes a lot of hustling and bustling. And like you sort of forget why you do your art, to tell a story, to if it's something that is healing for you, like all the really, really deep whys, we sort of forget when we're in the hustle and bustle. And then it's hard for us to then create music or create within our niche. And unfortunately, so many people just never release stuff and they never, put things out. And so I I was definitely in that stage of life, and COVID, because I had to be still, forced me to understand that my value, my talent comes from me being, my experiences, me breathing, like being present. That's where my value lies, not in, running around paying my rent with all these side jobs, but not necessarily being able to create and hone in on my craft. And so, yeah, who would have thought a pregnancy would like bring me to this realization? But it did, and that's why I'm telling the story.
Wow. And so the project is called Baby Moon.
Yes.
How did you kind of come up with that name? And what does that title mean to you?
So it's crazy. I actually I wrote this album in maybe 2 or 3 days, and I was definitely pregnant. Because I literally was on my bed and I was just like, oh, I don't want to really go anywhere. But then I like kept hearing these melodies and I was like, all right, I have to get this down. So I literally used my Play keyboard. It's like a keyboard where it doesn't connect to your laptop. It's literally like battery powered.
Oh, I have one of those just to like get the note.
Yeah, just to get the note. And that's how I made the melody for all of the songs. And so Baby Moon came from, I felt like it was my honeymoon. Like I was making this music. I felt like I was getting through this healing. And I just felt like it's a honeymoon, but a baby moon. And I know
Mm-hmm.
people go on baby moons, but like I felt like why it was a little bit more meaningful to me to name it that is because it's me and my child. I don't know, like it felt like a baby moon. Like because I was finding who I really was, I was uncovering who this new being is going to be. And so like it's a baby moon. It's like a not so much spiritual, but definitely not just like, oh, I'm going on vacation with my husband, but like, more of like oh, I'm having an experience and I'm evolving.
Do you feel like, because I watched that 1 minute video that you posted as a trailer and I posted it as well, do you feel like the project is like a collaboration between you and your baby and your, pregnancy? Like I feel like a co-author in a way.
Yes, I really do. I have my son on the credits for the album and royalties because without him, this would not have happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell everyone your son's name?
Yes, his name is Jackson. And it's really funny because a friend of mine, when I was like getting ready to do this project, she was like, imagine Jackson in like 18 years and he looks up his name and then sees like there was a whole project and a work that was created based off of him, or even not even looks up his name, but like he goes back and he sees like this art about him being born. Like, that I feel like that's a time that's not really looked at a lot. So for someone to be able to go back and really see their like the beginning stages in that way, I
Yeah, I
think
think that's a really creative. Well, I have to tell this story because some of my family is here, so they'll know. That when I was born, they like bought one of those books where they like personalize it and they like put your name and then like tell the
yeah,
story of your birth in a book. You know what I'm talking about? And so I always thought that was a really unique thing, and I still have the book, and I thought it was like really special just to like have it and just to like be able to like go back in a time that I
yeah,
was present, but I wasn't like consciously necessarily like actively present. And so this is like kind of a version of that, but just very like hits home and super authentic and personal and very a creative way to do it. So I think it's going to be really special for Jackson when they get older to like experience that again in a different outlet, in a different way, visually and musically, creatively. So that's amazing. I have like a few words that you sent me that I'm just going to read out loud about the project Baby Moon. And for those of you who are just joining, this is Janae Jones, a musician based in Brooklyn who has an event that's open on Friday at 7 p.m. in Williamsburg, right? Or Greenport?
yes, it is.
Williamsburg. It's going to be a kind of acoustic music release premiere because you're performing live, but also it's going to be a film premiere as well with your.
Yes.
Are you calling it a visual album? or just a film?
Yeah, a visual musical album. Yeah. Well,
Visual
I mean,
musical
yeah, visual
album.
album.
Yeah, and basically Janae wanted, to kind of build a little bit more. I know my aunt's here who her husband's also a musician. She wanted to build like the music community around like a little bit more, find like a sense of community, invite people in the music industry to the event who might be interested in one way or another or just interested in hearing Janae's story. So you sent me this via email, but the intention behind the project was to highlight musically how having a baby during a time of depression acted as a saving grace and ignited healing. So we'll definitely, if anyone has questions about or like any thoughts or questions or concerns or ideas that they have, I really want to talk with you eventually about this idea of being present, but also like
Yeah.
igniting healing. And then the creative concept that you sent me, Baby Moon, takes listeners on a mystical journey. I definitely felt that already from that little premiere, that little preview you sent. The journey takes place during the 9 months of pregnancy, so you are pregnant during this film, so that's amazing.
Yes, I was 8 months pregnant.
That's amazing. Each song represents the process of bringing new life to the world. The mother, you, sings lullabies to her child, and even the universe steps in to talk to the new creation in songs such as Home. Are you singing Home at the event?
No, but there's the lyrics and this. I'm doing a spoken text about it
Okay, yeah,
because
we have to talk
it
about what you're
basically
singing
bridges everything together.
on
Yeah.
Friday. The album has simple melodies and thick harmonies to bring out a more tribal sound. All in all, the listener will see the ups and the downs of creating life, from doubts as a mama's doubt, and to gratitude, warning sign, and even excitement, mama. I think everyone who is a parent or a grandparent can definitely relate, even if they're not a musician or an artist in some way, can definitely relate to the ups and downs of creating life. And then you have a quote here: beauty but alien, divine but mundane, the alien beauty, the divine mundane.
Yes.
Perfect.
That is that's the character. I feel like she holds two things at once. Like she's doubtful, she is showing all of her dark shades and dark shadows, and then she's also like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that I don't have good parts. And I feel like a lot of what I feel in culture and just social settings is like it's either this way or it's this way. And like we don't have any space to be like, no, all these things can exist in the same spot. And one thing being right does not negate something that could also be right, but is a different view. And so I just feel like the character I'm portraying is you're seeing all of these different shades of like the beauty of life, the mundane, just the whole process.
That's really it's really important to mention. I know that like personally for me on my artistic journey, there's this like dualism that keeps on coming up as a theme. Um, Definitely like the internal process, the internal creative being, and then like the external, the physicalized version, like reality versus fantasy almost in a way. But there's this duality in general in life that is just like a part of it. And how
Yeah.
do you feel? I keep on having these moments where lately I've been having these moments where I like have these realizations, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm realizing something, thinking that it's going to give me an answer.
Oh yeah. It
Right,
just
but
gives you more questions.
then I realize it's just like, okay, I had this realization, now I have to deal with the realization. There
Yeah.
is no answer. It doesn't give you, it's not like a math problem, it doesn't give you a solution. It's just like kind of what you're saying, a higher state of um, high
Vibrating. Being.
frequency,
Yeah, high frequency.
a higher frequency, right? So you're just like taking steps, but I guess this is a realization that we're having now too. It's like once you do find this journey to a higher frequency, it's not that it gives you anything like specifically tangible. It just kind of opens up a different lens or perspective.
Well, I think we think that once we've learned something, that's it. Like, oh, you know what? I want to be patient. You're put in certain situations, you have a realization about, oh, all right, if I just let go of the things, holding and clinging on to things, then I can literally just be in the moment, be patient, all these things. You have a realization, but then every situation after that realization feels like it's like testing your patience, where like you're put in all these situations, and not necessarily that those really annoying situations will just go away. Like we think once we have a realization, the problem goes away. No, we change. And so the same problems are going to be there because it's not like it's like forward, behind, all these things. It just is. Now, the things that are going to change are how you engage with it, how you react, how you respond, not react. Because a reaction, I feel like, is sort of always not what you would necessarily do had you taken a breath, and really gotten still. And so I say all this to say that having time to really sit and not necessarily have to be busy all the time is definitely beneficial.
Totally. And that's something that we talked about last time that we hung out, that like, I love that idea. I'm just like not there yet physically. But
Yeah, but it's not a static place. Like you'll get there. And
Yeah.
the fact that you're bringing awareness around this idea for yourself, like you're already thinking, I think I could be doing something better. I think that's the first step. It may not be your 10th step, but you got to start somewhere. And your
Totally.
awareness around this is your starting point.
Totally. And awareness and mindfulness is a big starting point for a lot of different projects and ideas. Do you want to talk a little bit about the event that's happening this Friday? Maybe just like how you went about planning it. I know that when we talked, you said it's not just like a one and done, like it's not just one event and then boom. It's like you have this series of things that you want to kind of pan out over time to kind of grow the community that you want to be a part of, or you want to help grow. So what exactly are we going to be experiencing on Friday? I'm very excited.
I am really huge on performance art. I really wasn't exposed to performance art until I was in college at BOCO, because it's not something you're going to see in a public school. And, it's not necessarily something you're exposed to unless you have the luxury to go to the Met. You have the luxury to, go to all these events that are not necessarily a priority. Like going to take a leisurely date or do something is not a priority of like, oh, I have to work because I have to pay bills. And so maybe I don't have the budget to spend it on X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. So I feel like my goal is to create performance art for all kinds of people at any given point in their journey. Because I've learned a lot from seeing performance art, like seeing an opera, seeing things that aren't necessarily on the radio, and just how they're expressed in real time. Like going to a performance and hearing something like on a recording are just two different things. Like I remember in college going and listening to Mahler at Harvard, and like that is so different than listening to it on a recording. Like I just don't know how to describe it. Like I felt the frequencies, the harmonies, and like it was healing for me. And I just don't think that should be left up for money. Like, oh, if you have the money to, then you can experience that. So this Friday is me, from a Black woman's perspective, creating performance art that will make you feel the same way as if you were at an orchestra, like giving you the same, I don't know, stillness. Because really all that, like what I really got from listening to an orchestra live was like, I felt a breath of fresh air. I was like, oh, like when it gets to certain points, you're just like, oh, my soul, how do you know my soul, this violin? And so I want to do that in a different setting. Maybe it's not an orchestra, but you can still feel that. And I do that with live looping. So I'm looping my voice live, and that is a way for me to be able to control those harmonies and bring them in and bring them out whenever I need it. because I'm looking to create like a healing vibration through this performance.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you see live performance, especially when there is live music, and I actually talk about this, or like it's one of my, not themes, it's one of my theses as an artist for myself. But talking about music specifically, there's something about like the vibrations literally of the music coming off the walls.
Yeah.
Because usually if you are
Yeah.
seeing a live performance, it's meant to be performed in that venue, right? It has some acoustics
Yeah.
going on and stuff like that. And so there's a special like buzz that happens, sensation that when you're watching or like experiencing live performance, especially with live music. In relationship with dance, if it isn't live music, you're still in a live performance. There's still this buzzing. And right now, I just had this thought. Maybe it comes from like literally the physical energy that the dancers are providing. That is probably what's providing this buzzing sensation. So my whole thing, and we talked about this a little bit, is that when you see live performance, dance performance, in a big proscenium stage, or you see a concert or a Broadway show or in like a huge space or a huge arena, a lot of the times, obviously, like audio wise, it's there, the energy's there, but I still feel like there's this lack sometimes of connecting to the artists that are on the stage because you're so far away, because maybe you don't have like floor seats, or you're farther back in the nosebleed seats, or like in the orchestra or in the balcony. And so it's like one of my personal artist theses is to figure out ways to allow the audience to experience that very intimate sensation that happens on the stage through various perspectives, through various outlets, through multidisciplinary work. But there's definitely a difference between seeing a performance in a huge venue versus seeing an intimate performance. And I guess the question that I have as an artist is, where do they intertwine and where do they meet? How do you keep that like sense of intimacy from an intimate performance in a big, huge venue? And small solutions that aren't necessarily solutions to me as an artist, but are solutions for some people are like, for example, when you go to Madison Square Garden and they have like the huge TVs so that like you can see a little bit better about what's going on. Or like if I go to BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music, and I bring my binoculars, like, and I just want to see like what's going on. I want to see everything, experience it like full 360. Yeah, just some things that I think about literally on a daily basis.
I'm like, that is a loaded question. But I honestly think that it starts with being intentional about everything. Mm-hmm. I feel like what ends up happening when you think about a big arena, you think about, oh, I'm going to do this show for 1,000 people. I think why it tends to feel less intimate is because everything gets big. And like, it's hard to actually focus on the story. You start losing that. Like, I've even taken like an acoustic album versus like an actual instrumentation, like a produced album. Sometimes I'm like, I really like the acoustic version better because I can feel the rawness, the grit. Like, I feel that. And so I think it's not about the quantity. I think it's about the quality. So like, if you put like a big band and lights on a crappy message, it could sound like okay, but it's still a crappy message. Whereas if even in this bigger venue, you're really focused on making sure whatever story you're being told is told as clearly as possible, and like even from different harmony changes, even if it's on 10 different instruments or whatever, it's still happening at the exact moment. So like you can still feel like that vibration. I remember I was watching and people might hate this, feel like, wow, this is so cliche, but Coldplay, they were playing for the Super Bowl and huge crowd. And then they started to do a chant. And I literally, like everyone, I was at a Super Bowl party and everybody was like, oh, like everyone. It was a moment. And like, it literally could have been us and Coldplay. But like, this was a Super Bowl and that was through the TV. But he cut out all the music and like did a chant. And it was like a chant where everybody felt like he's telling my story. Like, I think that is it's possible. But once again, they're very clear on why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, what exactly is happening on Friday? What are we going to walk into?
What's happening on Friday is you're coming in, you're talking. Um, I just want people to get to know each other, network, and not necessarily network, but connect. There we go. I
Mm-hmm.
want to leave space for people to connect. And then we're going to show the short film. And then after that, I'm going to perform the music that you heard live in a very, and so
Can you say it again?
it's
If you
just like,
you said something acoustic in a very what way?
yeah, I'm just going to perform basically the music you just heard acoustically.
Amazing. Is it going to happen back to back?
There's going to be like 20 minutes in between the film and the actual performance.
Cool. I feel like it's going to have this like BBC radio vibe. I don't know why.
Yes, I want it to feel like Tiny Desk, like, everyone feels like, once again, intimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like what Tiny Desk does is they take this one intimate performance and like that millions of people watch it. So like that's another way to, even on a bigger scale of how many people you're reaching, just the way it's filmed can make you feel like you're there, even though you're not.
Amazing. Are you going to be in your character and costume?
I am.
And
it's not going to be the same costume, but it's going to be a character. Yeah.
I was going to say, because now you've given birth already.
Yeah, I am no longer pregnant, thank God.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the relationship between now that you have given birth and now that your baby moon has been created and Jackson is here? What does that mean for you, telling that story after the fact? Which I know happens for all artists in general. Like, you know what I mean? They have a hit that they wrote like 3 years ago, and like a year later it becomes a hit, and then they have to play it for like 2 years straight. And it's like, how does time like relate to your artwork, and specifically with this project and kind of releasing it after the fact?
Well, honestly, I think it's even better now because before I gave birth, like it hadn't come full circle. And so I was like, wait, was this all a good idea? But like once I gave birth and I was like, wow, there's another human being. It just made the beginning parts so much better because I'm like, oh, I needed that to get here. And so like for me, it doesn't become like, oh, this story isn't relevant. I'm like, wow, every time I get to perform this, I get to have that moment where I'm like, wow, I didn't die. Like I made it. And so like for me, that's like, it makes it every time it's different because I can tell that story differently every time.
Yeah. And that's actually the special thing about art in general. There's not one way to tell the story. I mean, in life in general, there's not one way to tell the story. So in a sense, it's always living and breathing and evolving. And so it can really die. And we talked about this too at the cafe, how like I feel like I try to create these new ideas for new pieces, but at the end of the day, I feel like they end up kind of telling a similar story in a different perspective, in a different light, in a different world. But I feel like there are like, let me know if you feel differently about this, but I feel like there are like a handful of stories or experiences, but not in a specific way, just like a sensation, a feeling, a thought that we think about a lot as individual people. And I personally don't feel like I have a lot. Like I feel like it's like a few that I hold on to closely, and there's just like they're super like like they have a lot of depth to them. So there's like a lot of layers that I can unpack, right, and tell. But I feel like my story, my narrative, is like very specific, and it's not that I have like 20 like life-changing things that I have to say, but I feel like there's a few, and I'm not sure if that's because of any specific reason, or if it's just that there are certain things in our lives that affect us a lot, or that we feel really attached to, that we feel like are important. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I feel like there's so many things about what you just said. I feel like, one, because we never get the time and space to get curious about our story and like really have some silence before we start, dancing, singing, X, Y, and Z. Like, I went from a performance arts high school into BOCO, and all these things were training me and training my voice, but they weren't training my voice, my inner voice. So I could have all this technical training, but if I have nothing to say, it means nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I realize is because we don't necessarily have the time to dig into our story, see our little nuances, and like really not even own it, but live in our uniqueness, I think we would find that what we think is such a vague story is actually very, 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 very unique. Like, I take somebody like Issa Rae. She blew up because she was talking to that awkward Black girl. And you may think you're the only awkward Black girl, but as soon as she did this platform, like thousands of people were like, that's me. You're nuanced to me. I'm not just Black. I'm an awkward Black girl. Like, no one was telling my story. And she like blew up. And I feel like we don't, there's two things to that. I think for a very long time, it was only white men. And like, okay, how many nuanced versions of a white male story can we see and hear? But I think now that other people are being able to have a seat at this table, whatever that looks like, whether it's corporate or whether it's like using social media to work for you, where you can spread your message, we're finding that like, oh, wow, what I thought was everyone's story is actually like, if I really, really go deep, it's like a very specific, unique story. And then once you're there, those people will gravitate towards you. And then the people that gravitate towards you because you're telling their story will then bring other people that may not fully relate. And so like right now, Issa Rae is not like just like by awkward Black girls. She's like huge. And I think once again, the day one fans for her like really were loyal, because once again, it wasn't like a gimmick thing. Like, she was telling her story and even letting that evolve. And that was huge.
Wow. That really like brought some inspiration to me right now in that moment, because I feel like myself as an individual, I tend to I have the ability to put on these different hats, because I'm not going to put it on one thing or another, but I'm a very mutable person. Like, I get along with different types of people. So I feel like generally in life, I try to make things as inclusive as possible. And that is, one of the mission statements, sections of Project.KB, being inclusive, accessing art, presenting the community that we present, which for me right now in Brownsville is a BIPOC community, as a Latina-owned business or a Latina-owned nonprofit, as a Latina artistic director. That's my story, but I try to make it as inclusive as possible. And I want to spend a day or two, or maybe longer, probably.
I'm like, a day or two. I'm like, spend a year.
No, yeah, long.
Your eyes.
The first dabble. Say it again.
I said, now you know how I felt during COVID, when I had all that time and I was pregnant, and I was like, no, I really have to sit with this, and like, I can't run. Yep, that was it. Your eyes. You're like, a year.
Yeah. No, totally. I guess, I mean, that is like literally something that I would do, but a first dabble into it about what that specific unique story. There's so many things that came to mind when you said that, but now I just like want to sit with it. You mentioned this a little bit. I mentioned it. So if you want to share a little bit about your experiences with finding this present state where you're being, prioritizing being present in the moment. I know you mentioned breath already, taking breaths. I know I meditate, or even a little bit about this like higher frequency idea that you want to connect with people or communities that are striving for this higher frequency. What exactly do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, first and foremost, when I started getting curious about this depression I was feeling, I had a therapist, and that was super helpful because we at the beginning through like boundaries, and she really understood like what it was I was looking for. I was like, I know I'm standing in my own way and I don't know how. And then the other thing was, who am I without anxiety? Because like I used to think everybody walked around with their chest tight all day, every day. And like the same feeling you would feel if you were in imminent danger, like that's how I felt like on a daily basis. But I didn't know that that's like, it's not even that it's not normal. That's just not how I want to live.
Yeah,
But I
not that
just
it's
thought,
not normal, because it's quite relatable and quite normal, but it's not the way you have to live your life, the
ex-
way you practice.
exactly. And so I, through therapy, was able to get curious about it. Like that was the difference for me. It wasn't like, Priska, you are depressed. It was more like, Priska, why are you feeling depressed? And then when that happened, it gave space for the two to exist at the same time. And I was really able to call my feelings as they were, but not necessarily create a role. Like now I'm a depressed person. I was always this way. I'm just sad. You know, like, no, that narrative, I was like, no, there's a reason why, and I can get to the root of that. And so I feel like, wait, remind me of your question one more time.
No, you were answering it, but your thoughts or practices on being present or including breath into your daily, and why you want to attract a higher frequency.
Yeah, so just me knowing that that wasn't it, I think that's what led me to finding what it was. I think, like, for me, I thought healing would be like this one static place, but I was like, oh, healing is ever happening. As long as I'm alive, I will be healing. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I, through that process, have let that lead me to me being present as an artist. Like me actually being okay with Priska and with Janae, um, that only opened up my capabilities as Janae an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had, like I have to bring my whole self on the stage,
Mm.
but I can't, like, yeah, it forces you to really stand in the middle where you can use your story, but you can tell it from a narrative that doesn't necessarily have to be uh negative. Like, you know, stuff happens, but like then this happened, and I learned from this and that. I feel like that is healing because it's like, oh, okay, she now imagine then someone is telling their full complete story and they're very niche to you. Like they are they look like you. They grew up like you. Like once again, Issa Rae. I was like, no, she's me. Like
Yeah.
what? It just, and then now just see the whole process. Yeah. So I know I sort of went around from the question, but yeah.
No, I think you definitely hit on some strong points and you answered the question in ways. I guess this is a like kind of a question I'm asking for selfish purposes, but I think that other people will be able to relate and slash think about this. So I can find myself getting to points where I want to, discuss the healing part, right? Because we all, or maybe not we all, have a tendency, but our culture has had a tendency of focusing on the negative, like you talked about. What's the negative experience? Why do we all like feeling sad? Why do we all like talking about feeling sad? You know what I mean? So when I get to the point of wanting to talk about what I learned, or like the things in life that I practice that I want to share, and I get to this point of writing, whether it be writing to give me tasks for dance, or just writing narrative, or just writing a poem or whatever, I find I sometimes get to a place be preachy. You know what I mean? With like the things that you've learned. So I'm curious if you have any tips or thoughts about how to tell that healing story, how to tell the positivity without being like, this is what I learned, you know?
Well, I think about when I was in college and I went to St. Cecilia's Church, and I grew up Catholic, but like by no means was I like, I'm going to school, I gotta find me a church. Like, no, that was not anything that I was doing. It just happened that I sang there one Sunday and I saw the priest, and I was like, wow, that's it. And the reason why I felt that way is because he came down into the pews and he told a story. And in that story, you found, oh, wow, this is where he failed, or this is where this person failed. And after we as a congregation would have a realization, um, he would say, and I'm not telling you this because I've overcome this. He's like, I'm struggling with this with you guys. And the priest said that as he was like in the pews talking to people. And like for me, I never felt like he was preaching. He really changed the way I viewed religion. Because I was like, oh, he's not talking about you have to do this, you have to do that. He was like, no, two things exist at once. But somewhere deep down, if you're silent enough, you'll know what that right choices in this given moment is. But he was never trying to say right is static. And so I feel like when you're able to get super curious about whatever story you're telling, it's going to arc. So like if it's arcing, even if one's like piece of it seems preachy, because of how you told the story and like how you've finesse the information up until that point, it's just going to fall into place. It's not going to be like, but that's why you it's not going to be this sort of, I don't know, inauthentic, like, oh, it's been said already sort of thing. But once again, you have to embrace your story and your why, because when you spend time, that's when you're going to really understand the actual start. Because if you think your start is at the preachy moment, yeah, that doesn't resonate with me. But like, if your start is at, I had nothing, and like, I really didn't understand how I was going to get through this, and then you can tell that story of how this happened, that's something where people want it. Like, people will come from everywhere to see that story. It's,
Totally.
yeah.
Kind of have to dig back and be like, not only, but one way is to dig back and think about like, when is the first time I had this thought and where was I? What place was I?
Yeah.
Find this
Because
narrative.
then that thought can
So
then that can be movement, you know, and it's different movement from a different part of that story, you know.
totally.
Like I feel like Hamilton got really big because he was telling the complete story authentically from start to finish. Everything was super intentional, and so yeah, there are parts where if it was isolated, you'd be like, yeah, whatever. But in the whole show of Hamilton, you're like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah,
Wow. And then those highs can really be highs.
totally. Yeah. I like that. And you said embracing the why, and we go back to like kind of this practice of patience, being present, and really sitting with your thoughts and allowing them to truly, truly digest, and not giving yourself, I guess, not. And this is something I've been working on in my open rehearsal residency. Is that like usually in a rehearsal process or in a project process, there's a deadline and there's all this stuff, and so your creativity gets like stinted a little bit because you're accomplishing goals. You're not allowing yourself to like just like be creative with no sense of like what is happening to the art. And so that's what I'm
Well,
exploring. What we're gonna say.
I would say to that, for me, what I realized is when I was actually given those opportunities to just create, I would bring the same energy to a deadline project, or I wouldn't actually take steps towards it. And the reason why is because it wasn't the deadlines, it's not the projects, it's that, once again, I'm not clear on my story and my why. And so I could be technically trained, but if I don't know what I'm saying, it means nothing. I could have a beautiful voice, but if that voice, there's not a story in it, it's just a tone. It's just it's just a tone.
I love that. That is very clear what you just said. Yeah, I was thinking about this because I have a performance opportunity happening at the end of August, August 28th. And I'm in rehearsals for something right now, but this performance, it's like for a 2-minute, 3-minute film. So there's like 4 to 5 minutes of material. But this group wants 20 to 30 minutes of material. And I'm like, and in a month. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I think I'm going to start with the why. I'm going to start with the why. Why am I doing
Mm.
Because I feel like a lot of times I can definitely fall into this idea of tone and like an overall feeling, but not specifically what exactly you're telling. So this is cool to think about in terms of creative process. How do you think? Just like one, I want you to talk a little bit more about like after I ask this question, kind of what the vibes you're hoping for on Friday, or like who might be interested on coming and why they might want to come, and then what else you have coming up after this event. But my last question for you in terms of creative process and being present and higher frequency, embracing the why, is do you want to talk a little bit about how you found this whole idea of embracing the why, or what's the story, being clear with your intention? Like, is there a specific time that you had that realization, or I don't know, just like a little bit about how it seems like one of your artistic missions in life is to really figure out what the message it is that you're trying to send, why you're doing the work, and like kind of sitting in that specificity and intention.
So I got really clear on that because that's what was holding me back. So I was spending a lot of money, of my own money that I'm using from, that I'm generating from a side job, to support me and then pay for my projects. But then my projects weren't going anywhere because I wasn't fully completing them. I was very much paying for things, but they were not really working because I wasn't very clear as to what it was I was doing and why I was doing it. And so I had a great voice. I was doing a lot of like the same stuff you're going to hear on Friday. Like I was looping live, I was doing all that stuff, but I was getting lost in the technicalities of it. And then what was even worse is like I was only surrounding myself with like my artist friend crew. And like it wasn't helpful because the artists that are my friends are not my fans. Like my fans aren't necessarily into art, aren't necessarily creatives, but it doesn't mean they don't resonate with my story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got out of the sort of doing, doing a lot and not having clarity around my why. I got out of that because I realized like nothing can stop me from sharing my message. And right now, all these other variables were stopping me from sharing my message once I knew what that was. And I actually found that message when I was in a songwriting camp. And it was crazy. It wasn't like there was a course that was like, oh, your message is the most important thing. It was that all these different people from different sectors were coming in, and basically their advice, and these were people who were in the industry, who were well known. They were coming in and they were like, yeah, there's really no map. What ends up happening is somebody is super, super talented. And then from there, you do anything you can to support them. That everything. I was talking to like lawyers, like entertainment lawyers, talking about people who do royalties, talking about other artists, talking about managers, talking about anyone who is a part of an artist, their growth and their journey. They were saying like, no, it's not that I'm an expert and I went to school and that was what this was. They were like, no, it's because there was an artist who was so clear on their story. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so simple. Like they had nothing, but even with nothing, they were able to convey what they can convey with $1 million budget with a zero budget. And so that I was like, whoa. And I was so inspired from that songwriting course that I actually created an EP in 3 days. It's actually, the link is in my Spotify, Shades of a Black Queen. And the first three songs were the EP, and then I just expanded on the album. And I mixed, mastered, and edited, like I did all of it myself. And I released it, and I was like, oh, it's not everything else. It's me, because I got this done by myself. And it's not to say I only need myself. The reason I got it done with no resources was because the story was so strong. The name of the EP is Shades of a Black Queen. And the first song talks about my reality is not that different from your reality. And like, it was during the, uh, social uprise of, like, you know, George Floyd, all these things happening. And like, I was just like, initially I was really upset. Like, and I realized I was starting to be upset at other things. And I realized I was upset about myself, because I didn't really take the time to understand my own history. I don't, I'm not taking the time to understand other people's stories. And I'm like, there's so many stories and I haven't even uncovered my story. And then this song literally came out.
Wait, so you have stuff on Spotify. So how do people find you?
It's in the link in my Instagram, but it's on Spotify. It's the Soul of Janae.
The Soul of Janae. Cool. I'm
Yes.
gonna add you. I didn't add you. Now I'm gonna add you. Add you to my
Yes.
playlist.
I'm sorry, Soul of Janae. Soul of Janae. Soul of Janae.
Soul of Janae.
Yes, Soul of Janae. But yeah, yes. But yeah, that's sort of what brought me to this place where I'm like, it's not all the other stuff. You can pay for a social media person, you can pay for a photographer, you can pay for a makeup artist, you can do all these things, but if when you get into that studio, that room, and you may have the top people there, and you can't tell your story, all the access, all the resources in the world are not going to get you to success. Like, you're just, it's not gonna, especially for your own self. Even if you do get commercially big, you're not gonna feel, it's different. It's not the same feeling when you're tapped into who you really are, whatever that looks like for you, whatever your why is.
That is so fascinating, and I'm glad that we talked about this because I haven't been able to get to like a root in one of these in the dressing room conversations in terms of creative process and collaboration. And so I think it's a really good starting point for anyone who has been listening and watching, and thank you for tuning in, about even just self-realization or even about creating something, embracing the why, I wrote down as a keyword. Let's take these last few minutes if you just want to say anything about this Friday's event or about what you have upcoming afterwards, or anything else.
Yes. Well, this Friday, it's going to be live streaming on Instagram. So if you cannot make it, it is definitely going to be on at 8:30. So just go to Soul of Janae at 8:30 and you'll see the whole performance. This is all leading up to the album release. I also wrote a children's book based off of the children's album. And it's not a children's album, but it's based off of my child being born. And all these things are going to be coming out in late fall. So everything is sort of leading up to the full picture because it's not a full album release. It's basically an EP, and it's really focused on the short film. It just happens that the short film warranted 3 songs, so I just released 3 songs and called it an EP. But it's really about the story, and it's leading little bits and pieces for you to see the full album of this full experience. Because right now you're getting like an overview, but like the album's going to be the in detail.
And do you see that you'll have some more performances in person happening after the fall and such?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to start doing some Mommy and Me children's book readings, to really, you know, hone in on that message. Like, no matter where you go, your home is like, it's always here. And like, you, even no matter how far you go, you can always call for home. And so like, wouldn't it be amazing if like children at a very young age were starting to get curious about that concept of like, oh, home isn't outside, home is inside.
Yeah.
And it's unique to my own experience and journey.
Yeah, and they have that saying, home is where the heart is. But I feel like as a child, I never really got to understand what that meant. You know, home is where the heart is.
Yeah.
Oh, family. You know, that's like the first thing
Yeah.
that comes to mind. But awesome. So yeah, I'll be there this Friday. So see you there if you're coming. Meaning I'll see you there, but also see you there for the people who are listening. Friday at 7 p.m. in Williamsburg. I posted the flyer. It's on my story. It's on your story as well, I'm sure.
Yes, the live stream is on my story.
The live
Check
stream.
it out
And
live.
check out Janae's Spotify as well. Soul of Janae.
Yes. Yes.
Yay. Well, thank you for taking the time out and having this
This
really
was great.
fun
I had
conversation.
fun.
Yeah, so much fun. And this is recorded, so I'll post it eventually, and I'll send you the info of where it'll go on. It won't go on Instagram, it'll go on public television, but yes.
Got you.
Thanks for taking the time out. I'll see you on Friday.
See you on Friday. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.